Hello and welcome back. Hope you're having a good day. And this is the next installment, part 9 of the Lords of the World narrative. And the subject today is the oldest conspiracy on record. In fact, it dates back almost 4,000 years, and what is surprising about it is that the descendants of the original perpetrators are still doing the same thing today, using the same playbook. But first, let's have a word about conspiracies in general. They are actually a way of life because everyone engages in them. And most of the time, they're generally looked upon as sinister, but some of them are really quite innocent. Next month, we have the holidays coming up, and I'm sure you've all heard the song "Walking in a Winter Wonderland," where the lovesick couple goes on to say, later on we'll conspire as we dream by the fire to face unafraid the plans that we made, walking in a winter wonderland. Well, I'm sure they're not planning to set off a bomb in Times Square or to car bomb a police station. So let's not forget that somewhere in this great nation of ours there might be a couple of techies working in a garage in secret to develop a new search engine or some new cloud application. And for all you know, your friends might be meeting in secret right now to plan a surprise birthday party. But anyway, the one we're going to talk about now is really unique in that it has remained entirely undetected for all time. It's the first exposure I know of. And I have, of course, I'm conversing with people and converting them to the truth, and every one of them so far has been surprised. I didn't know that was there. So, without further ado, and bearing in mind that I am an atheist, but despite that fact, if you want to follow along, grab your Bibles, because, as you're going to find out in future installments, beginning with this one, that the Bible is actually an historic document. And there are several points of connection between biblical history and academic history. So let's get on with this particular one. You're going to be looking in Genesis chapters 41 through 47. Now, this is an awful lot of reading, and we all know how dense biblical texts can be, and there's a whole lot of stuff mixed in there. So you're going to have to kind of go through and sort out the pertinent details as we go along. Now, this particular episode is really a well-known part of the Bible, and it begins in 1947 when a 12-year-old boy by the name of Joseph is abducted by his older brothers, who are jealous of the fact that the young boy is the patriarch Jacob's favorite. So they grab Joe, hand him over to a caravan of Ishmaelites, who are heading to Egypt, where upon his arrival he is sold into slavery in the service of the wealthy erstwhile military figure, public official, and the wealthiest landowner in all of Kemet, which is what the Egyptians called Egypt. And of course there's a couple of anomalies right from the start, because I watch different episodes with like 48 Hours and Dateline, and these cover a lot of criminal activities and criminal justice and all that. And boy, when somebody's kid or sister or boyfriend, girlfriend, even just close friend turns up missing, well, they start wondering what happened. Where did this person go? And they start search parties and broadcasting public announcements, the Amber Alerts maybe. They start posting broadsides and billboards around town looking for this person. But Jacob, that is, doesn't react at all. And doesn't he know that his sons abducted Joseph? Just something just doesn't sit right with me. But anyway, so now Joe is working for Potiphar, and we don't hear anything about him for a number of years, probably 10, 12, whatever, until the scandal involving Potiphar's wife. And we are told that she approached Joseph with an indecent proposal. A little hanky-panky, And of course, Joe wasn't having any of that, so he told her to take a walk. Of course, in the finest tradition of the woman scorned, the old lady turns the tables and tells her hubby that it was Joe that made the advances. That happens. So, well, Potiphar, excuse me, he's got to live with the old lady, so Joe's number comes up. And that number is 86, and he is bounced out of his job and bundled off to prison. And here there's something else that maybe has a slight tinge of an odor to it. That at the time of his dismissal, Joseph was overseer of all Potiphar's lands. Well, maybe he was just extremely talented. Maybe he was a real world beater. Never know, but let's just bookmark that little detail. Well, now it's the year 1930 BC. Joseph now encounters two servants who were lately of Pharaoh's court, and one is a butler, a servant. Butler is what King James's bishops decided to call the guy, and the other one is a baker. And they have dreams. One has a dream of a tree with three branches. That's the butler. Baker has the one with the 3 baskets on his head, and Joseph tells him what these dreams really mean. He does interpret these dreams. And to the butler, he says, oh, the 3 branches are 3 days, and at the end of that time, you're going to be pardoned, fully pardoned and reinstated at Pharaoh's court. And we don't have a record of exactly what the butler said, but probably something like, yippee! Well, the baker, he's not going to do so well, because now the baker has the 3 baskets on his head, and he says, and Joe says, actually, that those are 3 days, and he's going to get hanged. And 3 days comes along. Sure enough, Baker gets hanged. Now, Joseph either has some really, really miraculous powers, or, as we read, at this time, he is a trustee at the prison. Talk about upward mobility. So, these 2 guys, the butler and the baker, are put under his guidance, I think the word is. Well, can you say inside information? I kind of thought you could. Well, anyway, here we go. Now, there are 2 versions of the conversation Joe has with the butler before he leaves to go back to Pharaoh's court. In one of these, quite understandably, it has Joe saying to the butler, hey, don't forget to tell Pharaoh about me. Of course, he wants to get sprung. I mean, anybody would understand that. The second version has Joseph say to the butler, don't forget to tell Pharaoh that I do good dreams. Well, okay. Now, it's the second one that seems to have the edge in credibility, because Joe spends 2 more years in the slam. He doesn't get out. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the Pharaoh, now it's his turn. He has dreams. In one of them, he's got 7 kinds of water birds, and I think they're walking around in the Nile or something. And in the second dream, he's got 7 ears of corn that dry up, shrivel up, and blown away in a cloud of dust by the desert winds. Well, the Pharaoh calls his magicians, priests, fortune tellers, to come up with interpretations, what these dreams mean. And I guess we could imagine that the people, when they're asked, they probably all took a crack at it. But then we learn that after all this, the Pharaoh says, no, it can't be any of those. And it's just at that time when the butler gives himself a dope slap, and he says, oh, wait a minute, hold the phone. I knew this guy in prison, and boy, could he do dreams. Wow, this guy was terrific. So the Pharaoh would probably tell him, hey, don't just stand around there posing for animal crackers. Go get this clown. So Joseph is brought to Pharaoh. And he gives us an interpretation which it seems really, really bizarre. Now let's talk about dream interpretations. What they are is guesswork. It's an opinion. What do I think it means? And it's usually something about the future, something that hasn't happened yet, and we could all know that no one can tell the future. Unless you have a part in bringing that future about. But this is a whole different ballgame here, because Joseph is very, very specific. He says, well, there's the 7 kinds. We're going to have 7 years of prosperity and bounty, and everything's going to be really cool, really great. But after that, 7 years of famine. So, and the Pharaoh bought it. And, this is really, really pretty specific, and certainly doesn't fit the bill, because in like normal fortune telling, the language is kind of vague and inspecific, and of course there's no timeline. So whatever the prognostication happens to be, well, in time there's a number of different events that you can interpret as being significant to that prediction. But never has anyone ever been able to call the shots like Joseph does, because as we well know, that's exactly what happens. Well, the next thing that's pretty amazing is when the Pharaoh now elevates Joseph. He's Zaphnath, he gives him a name and an Egyptian wife, and promotes him to second banana in the whole kingdom. Only one guy outranks Joseph now, that's the Pharaoh himself. And Joe has the idea, the job of supervising the storage of surplus grain in the silos against the famine that's supposed to come along in the next 7 years. Are you beginning to smell something here? Well, okay. Of course, when it comes to solidifying and justifying a prediction of this kind, Egypt is the one land where you can make it happen, because the life of the kingdom, the land, relies exclusively on the flooding of the Nile, which brings the nutrients down from Central Africa to enrich the land. And Kemet, by the way, means black soil, so that's the good farmland. So with 7 years lead time, it is possible that some bad guys could go up to the headwaters of the Blue Nile, the White Nile, which are tributaries to the main river, and maybe start damming it up so that the flood doesn't go quite so high, or maybe they're dumping impurities into it so as to counteract the nutrients and the phosphates and the minerals. Anyway, they have 7 years to tamper with it so that Joseph's prediction pans out. Well, I guess everyone knows the story about how Joseph, the 7 years, causes the storehouses to be filled with grain. And this is all by imposition. I mean, he's not buying the grain, he's just ordering them. Oh, any surplus grain, you just bring it over here and we'll put it in the storehouse. Now, of the many people who know the story about the gathering of the grain, how many know about how the grain was distributed in 1921, when the famine finally struck, as predicted? That should warn you. Well, let me read you from the text of chapter 47, and you could follow along with it. Beginning with verse 14, "And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. And Joseph said, Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle, if money fail. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for the flocks, and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses. And he fed them with bread for all their cattle that year. When that year was ended, they came unto him the second year, and said unto him, We will not hide it from my Lord. Now he's a Lord. That our money is spent. My Lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our lands. Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh. And give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land not be desolate. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. And so the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof. Only the land of the priests bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did not eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands. Then Joseph said unto the people, Behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the 5th part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, for the seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your household, and for food for your little ones. And they said, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein and grew and multiplied exceedingly. So in short, this crook takes the grain that the Egyptians brought free and sells it to them. He extorts everything from these people. And so the Egyptians, like many others, become tenants on the lands they used to own. Does that sound familiar? Oh, but there's more. I mean, if you're not sick enough by now, just stick around, because this famine spread to Canaan as well. And Jacob, we hear from Jacob again. He didn't really react too much to Joseph's abduction, and the sons didn't even get any timeouts as far as punishment. But now he sends his sons to Egypt to buy grain. He gives them a bag of money. And on the way back, one of the brothers looks through the sacks of grain to see that everything's okay, no bugs or whatever. And he finds the bag of money. He takes it back to Jake, and Jake says, somebody must have screwed up there, So here's another bag of money. Go on down to Egypt and get us some more grain. Well, they do, and on the way back, the same guy starts going through the bags of grain, and this time, mamma mia, he finds both money bags. And after the second year, the Pharaoh tells Joe, hey, why don't you just signal Jacob to bring the folks down here? We got plenty of room. The land of Goshen and the plain of Ra, which is Ramesses, not the Pharaoh, the plain. It's a plateau. Okay. Now, in all this, there's one question that remains open, and that is during the year 1928, when Joseph is called back from prison and does his little act, which Pharaoh are we talking about? Because it seems like these dreams are somehow contrived, because they're the right dreams for Joseph to set the stage for this outright robbery, this grand larceny that they perpetrate on the Egyptians, which have always been very kind to them. It's really funny. Well, in 1928, there were two pharaohs. And I would refer you to one of the most authoritative books on ancient Egypt, and that is The Egypt of the Pharaohs by Sir Alan Gardner, Oxford Press, 1961, and I believe 1965 reprint. Now, in the back of the book, it has the pharaohs of each dynasty listed. And if you look under 12th dynasty, you will see that in the year 1928, there were two pharaohs, Senwosret and Amenemhi II. Well, by that time, the dynasty it was only about 70 years old, because it was organized after the first intermediate period, a period of social unrest, civil wars, and complete violent anarchy. that Amenemhet I, around 1991 or 1990, pulled it all together and set up the 12th dynasty and started restoring the lands of the nomes or the city-states of Egypt to their original boundaries. And he passes out farmland and oxen, and it's sort of like the Domesday Book that the Normans produced in England in 1080. And it's an accounting of the entire land and just about where they stand, like an inventory. Well, Senwosret by this time was probably an old and very sick man, because he doesn't even live out the year. And by the way, this joint rule of pharaohs was a rather common practice, and other pharaohs of the 12th and the 18th dynasty also practiced it. One of the most notable ones is Amenhotep III and Amenhotep IV, who was Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. And revisionist history has spoiled that story too, but we'll talk about that later. Well, if Senwosret was on in years, and we know how handy the Egyptians were with potions and draughts and poisons, actually, the elderly pharaoh could very well have been drugged if he wasn't already suffering from dementia, and be accused or being told that he had these dreams when he probably doesn't even remember but doesn't know any better. I don't know if there was an Alzheimer's or whatever back in those days, but dementia is quite common among elderly people. I know I served about 8 months as a companion of a fine old gentleman. He was about 90 years old, and we had some good times until he finally died of leukemia, but he was a little bit demented too, and it was just the way it is. And I don't know if the Egyptians had anything like aluminum cans, so I don't know if there was any Alzheimer's in those days, but who knows. Anyway, the younger Amenemhet II was part of the plot, because he wanted to consolidate power, and he saw this as the way to do it. Imagine, I'll have this guy Joe extort the people out of their lands and possessions, and I'll own the whole place. Wonderful. Of course, this is a very short-sighted appraisal, and it wasn't until the Hebrews had been living in Egypt for 220 years that Egypt was invaded and conquered by the Hyksos. And you know where they came from? Canaan. So there you have the story. And if it has a familiar ring to it, just look at what Israel is doing to the Palestinians on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Look at how the map of Israel has changed with respect to the land of the Palestinians. And when you criticize them for it, they play the anti-Semitic card. I'm not bothering to consider that the Palestinians are also Semites. They were the Philistines of old. So there it is. The oldest conspiracy on record. And there is a connection with, or between biblical history and academic history. And the Hyksos added 6 kings to the Pharaoh's list, and it wasn't until the period between 1575 and 1555 BC that the 2 brothers, Amosa and Kamosa from Thebes, finally drove the Hyksos away and retook their land. Now there's something else that is a bit unusual about the Hebrews. Because we know from our own, our experience in foreign affairs that, or our knowledge of foreign affairs, that when a diaspora happens, and that's when a national emergency or a natural disaster or a political situation causes citizens of one country to seek asylum in neighboring countries. Well, what is true is that most of these people, after the emergency's over, things settle down and get back to normal, that they like to go home. But even after the Hyksos are chased out, the Hebrews stayed. Egypt is a beautiful land. See, we marvel over the structures that they left, the temples and the public buildings and the statues and all that. Marvelous, but back then they were all brightly painted, and so it was really a magic land to live in, and we would have enjoyed it there. Maybe we did. I don't know. But anyway, the events of this conspiracy, the outcome of this conspiracy, affected the course of the Bible for most of the rest of its content. So there'll be more coming about that. Only now, if we accept what really happened 4,000 years ago, when we are now told to wake up, maybe it's a lot later than we think. But anyway, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of this fine day. I know I am. And until next time, take care of yourself. Be happy. Don't worry. We're going to win this war. In the meantime, though, take care, and so long.